My name is Amara, I'm 34 years old, and the phone call I received at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning made my blood run cold. When I got married, I didn't tell my husband or his mother that the house we lived in was mine. I told them it belonged to my late grandmother. And thank God I kept that secret, because what they tried to do after our wedding would have destroyed me completely. If you want to hear how I outsmarted two criminals who thought I was their next victim, smash that like button right now, subscribe to Untold Stories, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear every single word of this. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what was really at stake here. That house they tried to steal from me? It wasn't just a piece of property. It was 6 years of my life. 6 years of working double shifts as a nurse, picking up extra hours during holidays while other people were celebrating with their families. 6 years of saying no to vacations, no to new clothes, no to dinners out with friends. 6 years of eating ramen noodles and rice and beans because every single dollar I made went into my savings account. I was 28 years old when I bought that house. 28. Do you know how hard it is for a single black woman to buy a 3-bedroom house in a prime neighborhood at 28? The bank questioned me like I was lying about my income. The real estate agent kept showing me properties in more affordable areas, which was code for neighborhoods she thought I belonged in. But I had my pre-approval letter. I had my down payment saved, and I had my pride. I found that house myself. A beautiful craftsman-style home with hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and a backyard big enough for the garden I'd always dreamed of having. The day I got the keys, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and cried. Not sad tears. Tears of accomplishment. Tears of pride. Tears of knowing that I had built something solid for myself that nobody could take away from me. I worked 2 jobs for 4 more years to pay off that mortgage early. 4 years of 12-hour shifts at the hospital, followed by overnight shifts at an urgent care clinic. I was exhausted all the time, but every mortgage payment I made felt like another brick in the fortress I was building around my future. By the time I was 32, that house was mine. Completely, 100% mine. No bank owned it. No cosigner had their name on it. Just me, Amara Johnson. And it was the most secure I had ever felt in my entire life. So when I met Derek, when this man came into my life with his charming smile and his smooth words, something inside me whispered, "Don't tell him the truth. I can't explain it rationally." I had no reason to distrust him at that point. We'd only been on 2 dates, but there was this voice, this instinct, this knowing in my gut that said, "Protect what you've built. Don't reveal everything." And so I lied. When Derek walked me home after our second date and stood on my porch admiring the house, when he asked if I was renting or if my family owned it, I heard myself say, "It was my grandmother's house. She passed away and left it to me in her will. I'm living here temporarily while the estate gets settled." The lie came out so smoothly, so naturally, that it almost scared me. But the moment I said it, I felt this sense of relief, like I had just protected something precious. I told myself I'd tell him the truth eventually, once I knew him better, once I could trust him completely. I had no idea that lie would end up saving everything. Let me tell you about Derek. Derek Thompson. 40 years old, 6'2", with these gray eyes that seem to look right through you. We met at a hospital charity gala about 10 months before everything exploded. I was there representing the nursing staff, and he was there because his pharmaceutical company was one of the sponsors. We ended up at the bar at the same time, both reaching for the last glass of champagne on the tray. He smiled, gestured for me to take it, and said something cheesy like, "Beauty before age." I rolled my eyes, but I was charmed despite myself. We talked for 2 hours at that gala. He was funny, intelligent. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. He didn't interrupt me or talk over me like so many men do. He told me about his job in pharmaceutical sales, how he'd been divorced for 3 years, how he was living with his mother temporarily while he got back on his feet financially. That last part should have been a red flag for a 40-year-old man, but he explained it in a way that made sense. His mother was getting older, he said. She needed help around the house. He was being a good son. We exchanged numbers. He texted me the next day. We went on our first date that weekend to this beautiful soul food restaurant in the historic district. Derek was the perfect gentleman. Pulled out my chair, asked about my day, complimented me without being creepy about it. He told me about his childhood, his father who had passed away when Derek was in college, his mother who had worked as a real estate agent for 30 years before retiring. On our third date, he told me he'd been married once before, in his 20s, and it had ended badly. He didn't go into detail, just said they'd been too young and wanted different things. I appreciated what I thought was his honesty. I told him about my parents dying in a car accident when I was 22, about being an only child, about building my life from scratch with no safety net. Looking back now, I can see how he was gathering information. Every question was strategic. Every bit of personal history I shared was being filed away for later use. But at the time, it just felt like we were getting to know each other. It felt like the beginning of something real. After 4 months of dating, Derek asked me to meet his mother. He'd been putting it off, which he explained by saying his mother was particular about the women in his life. She'd been disappointed by his ex-wife and was protective of him. I understood. I was nervous but excited. Meeting the mother felt like a significant step. Patricia Thompson was 67 years old, thin as a rail, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Her handshake was firm and cold. She invited me into her immaculate apartment. Everything white and glass and uncomfortable looking. We sat in her living room drinking tea that tasted like hot water with a hint of disappointment, and she interrogated me. That's not an exaggeration. She interrogated me. Where was I from? What did my parents do before they died? Did I have any siblings? Any other family? What did I do for work? How much did nurses make these days? Did I own property or rent? Was I financially stable? Did I have debt? Was I close with any extended family? I answered her questions as politely as I could, feeling more and more uncomfortable with each one. When I mentioned that I lived in my grandmother's house, Patricia's entire demeanor shifted. She leaned forward, suddenly very interested. So, your grandmother left you property? Where is this house? What neighborhood? How many bedrooms? Is the estate fully settled? Are there any other heirs? I told her the house was in Riverside Heights, the historic district. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. My grandmother had been my only family, and she'd left everything to me. The estate was still being settled. I lied, so I wasn't technically the owner yet. I was just living there temporarily, with the estate lawyer's permission. Patricia and Derek exchanged this look. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. It was quick, just a flash, but it was loaded with meaning. At the time, I couldn't decode it. Now, I know exactly what that look meant. It meant, she's perfect. It meant, she's the one. It meant, this is going to work. When I left that day, Derek walked me to my car and kissed me, telling me his mother really liked me. He texted me later that night saying his mother had called me respectable and well-raised. I was so relieved. I wanted his family's approval. I wanted this relationship to work. I had been single for so long, throwing myself into my career and my goal of financial independence. Derek felt like my reward for all that hard work. He felt like the universe finally giving me something good. 3 weeks later, Derek proposed. 3 weeks. Looking back, I can see how insane that timeline was. We'd only been dating for 5 months total. But Derek made it sound so romantic. He said, when you know, you know. He said he'd wasted too much time in his life on the wrong things and the wrong people, and he didn't want to waste any more time when he'd finally found the right person. He said he'd been waiting his whole life for someone like me. And I said yes. God help me. I said yes. Because I loved him. Or I loved who I thought he was. I loved the man who brought me coffee at the hospital after my overnight shifts. I loved the man who rubbed my feet when I came home exhausted. I loved the man who talked about our future like it was this beautiful, certain thing. I loved the fantasy he was selling me. We planned a small wedding. Derek insisted on keeping it intimate and inexpensive. Why waste money on one day, he said, when we could invest in our future together? That made sense to me. I'd always thought big weddings were wasteful anyway. We got married at a small event venue with 15 people present, my co-workers, a few of his colleagues, his mother, and a couple of friends. It was simple. I wore a white dress I found on sale. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. Derek cried when he said his. He looked into my eyes and promised to protect me, provide for me, and cherish me for the rest of our lives. Patricia gave a toast at our tiny reception. She stood up with her glass of champagne and smiled, this smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said, "Welcome to the family, Amara. My son has chosen well. In this family, we believe that what's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. We share everything. We support each other. We are a unit now." The way she said it made my skin crawl. There was something possessive in her tone, something almost threatening. But everyone else seemed to think it was a sweet toast, so I smiled and raised my glass and told myself I was being paranoid. The paranoia got worse after the wedding. Derek moved into my house immediately, which made sense since he'd been living with his mother, but the way he moved in felt invasive. He didn't ask where I wanted his things. He just started rearranging. He moved my furniture to make room for his. He took over half the closet, then more than half. He started referring to the house as our house, constantly. Our living room, our kitchen, our bedroom. Every time he said it, I felt this little spike of anxiety. But I told myself I was being selfish. We were married. Of course it was our house now. That's what marriage meant. Sharing. Patricia started showing up unannounced. That first week after we got back from our tiny honeymoon weekend, she came by every single day. She'd knock on the door and waltz in before I could even answer it. She'd walk through the rooms like she was appraising them. She'd run her hand along the mantel, look up at the crown molding, peer into closets. When I asked her what she was doing, she'd say she was just admiring what a beautiful home my grandmother had. Such craftsmanship, she'd say. They don't make houses like this anymore. This must be worth quite a lot of money. I started to notice she was taking photos. With her phone, quickly, when she thought I wasn't looking. Photos of the fireplace, the built-in bookshelves, the renovated kitchen, the hardwood floors. When I confronted her about it, she acted like I was being ridiculous. "I'm just documenting beautiful architecture," she said. "I used to be in real estate, remember? I appreciate good bones in a house." But it wasn't appreciation. It was assessment. She was calculating value. The whispered conversations started in week 2. I'd come home from work and find Derek and Patricia on the back porch or in the garage, talking in low voices. The second they heard me, they'd go silent. When I asked what they were discussing, Derek would brush it off, just catching up with Mom, just talking about her retirement plans. Nothing important. But it felt important. It felt secretive and wrong. I started paying closer attention. I'd pause before entering rooms to see if I could hear what they were saying. I caught fragments. Phrases that made no sense to me at the time, but that I filed away in my memory. "We need to move faster before she figures it out. The estate lawyer angle might work if we can find documentation. We have to make sure there's no way for her to contest it afterward." "Mom, are you sure about the timeline? What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong. We've done this before." That last phrase froze me in place. We've done this before. Done what before? What were they talking about? Then came the morning that changed everything. Tuesday, 5:47 a.m. My phone rang on my nightstand, vibrating so hard it nearly fell off onto the floor. I grabbed it, disoriented, still half asleep. Derek was snoring beside me, his arm flung over his eyes. The number on my screen was unfamiliar. Local area code. I answered it. Hello? The voice on the other end was professional, chipper, completely oblivious to the bomb they were about to drop into my life. Good morning. Is this Amara Johnson? Yes. This is she. Hi, Amara. This is Jennifer from Apex Realty Group. I'm calling to confirm the appointment we have scheduled for this Thursday at 10 a.m. We'll be coming by to do the appraisal and walkthrough of the property at 847 Riverside Heights. Will that time still work for you? I sat up in bed so fast I got dizzy. I'm sorry. What? What appointment? Jennifer sounded confused. The appointment for the property appraisal? Your husband Derek Thompson submitted the listing request through our online portal yesterday evening. He said you were both interested in selling the property quickly due to a job relocation. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to be sick. I never submitted any request. There must be some mistake. Oh. Jennifer's voice got cautious. Well, the request definitely came through our system. It has your address, your phone number, and your husband's name as the point of contact. He also uploaded what appears to be a power of attorney document giving him authority to list the property on behalf of the estate. A power of attorney? What power of attorney? Jennifer, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not authorize any of this. Someone submitted that request without my knowledge or permission. There was a pause on the line. Then Jennifer said, in a much more serious tone, I see. Ma'am, I think you need to contact our legal department immediately. If someone is attempting to list your property fraudulently, that's a criminal matter. I'm going to cancel this appointment right now and flag your account. You should also consider filing a police report. I hung up the phone and just sat there, staring at the wall. My hands were shaking. Derek was still asleep beside me, completely oblivious, or pretending to be. I looked at him lying there, this man I had married, this man I had welcomed into my home and my life, and I felt this wave of cold, clear understanding wash over me. He was trying to steal my house. He and his mother were planning to steal my house right out from under me, and they thought they could do it because they thought the house belonged to my dead grandmother's estate. They thought I was just a temporary occupant with no real legal claim. They thought they could forge some documents, convince me to sign some papers, list the property, sell it, take the money, and I'd be left with nothing. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the house was mine. Fully, legally, completely mine. There was no estate. There was no dead grandmother who had left me anything. There was just me, Amara Johnson. A woman who had worked herself half to death to build something secure, and who had listened to her instincts when those instincts told her to lie. I got out of bed slowly, carefully, trying not to wake Derek. I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and called the one person I knew I could trust. My best friend, Zara. She answered on the third ring, groggy and annoyed. Amara? It's not even 6 a.m. What's wrong? I need your help. I kept my voice low, barely above a whisper. I think Derek is trying to steal my house. Zara was suddenly wide awake. What? What are you talking about? I told her everything. The realtor call, the forged power of attorney, the whispered conversations I'd been overhearing, the way Patricia had been photographing every inch of my house, the way Derek had rushed the relationship, the wedding, everything. As I talked, I could hear myself putting the pieces together out loud. The pattern was so obvious now. How had I not seen it before? Zara was silent for a long moment after I finished. Then she said, Amara, listen to me. Don't confront him. Don't let him know that you know anything. You need to investigate this quietly before you make any moves. I work in county records, remember? Let me dig into Derek's background. Let me see what I can find. How long will that take? Give me 48 hours. In the meantime, act normal. Don't sign anything he puts in front of you. Don't agree to meet with any lawyers or real estate people he suggests. And for God's sake, don't tell him the truth about the house yet. I won't. I took a shaky breath. Zara, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm being paranoid? Zara's voice was firm. You're not wrong. Your gut is screaming at you for a reason. Trust it. I'll call you as soon as I find anything. I hung up and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked scared, betrayed, but underneath that, I could see something else starting to form. Anger. Cold, calculated anger. If Derek thought he was going to play me, he had another thing coming. I had built this house with my own sweat and sacrifice. I had protected it with my instincts and my lies. And I would burn it to the ground before I let him take it from me. I went back into the bedroom. Derek was awake now, stretching and yawning. Morning. Beautiful, he said, smiling at me like he hadn't just tried to commit fraud against me in the middle of the night. Who was on the phone? Wrong number, I lied smoothly. Some telemarketer. At 6 a.m? That's aggressive. I shrugged. I'm gonna make coffee. You want some? Always. Derek got out of bed and headed for the shower. I watched him go. This man I had thought I loved, and I felt nothing but disgust. He was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. He was a predator. And I had invited him into my home. The next 48 hours were torture. I had to act normal. I had to smile and kiss him goodbye when he left for work. I had to sit across from him at dinner and make small talk while my mind raced with questions. Who was he really? How many women had he done this to before? Was anything about our relationship real, or had every word out of his mouth been part of the con? Patricia came by on Wednesday afternoon. I was off work and was in the kitchen when I heard her key in the lock. Derek had given his mother a key to my house. My house. Without asking me. That was another thing I'd let slide, convinced myself was normal. Married couples shared keys with family, right? That's what you did. But now I understood. Patricia had a key so she could come and go as she pleased. So she could snoop through my documents when I wasn't home. So she could take measurements and photos and prepare her sales pitch to potential buyers. She walked in carrying a folder. Amara, dear, I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about something important. I forced myself to smile. Of course, Patricia. What's on your mind? She sat down at my kitchen table and opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal-looking papers with official seals. I've been thinking about your situation with your grandmother's estate. It's been dragging on for quite a while now, hasn't it? These things can take years if you're not careful. I used to work in real estate, and I've seen estates get tied up in probate for a decade or more. It's fine, I said carefully. The lawyer handling it says everything is progressing normally. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. Estate lawyers. They drag things out to bill more hours. What you need is to be proactive. I have a friend, an attorney who specializes in expediting estate transfers. He could probably cut through all the red tape and get you full ownership of this property within a month. That's not necessary. But think about it, Amara. Once you have full legal ownership, you and Derek can make real decisions about your future. You could sell this place, take the equity, buy something newer in a better school district. Start fresh as a couple. This house is beautiful, but it's old. The maintenance costs must be significant. Wouldn't you rather have something more practical? I felt rage bubbling up in my chest, but I kept my voice level. I like this house. I'm not interested in selling. Patricia's smile tightened. Of course not now. But down the line, when you and Derek start thinking about children, about schools, about building wealth, you'll want to consider all your options. All I'm saying is, having the legal ownership clear would give you those options. I'll think about it. I lied. She slid the folder across the table toward me. Here, I had my attorney friend draw up some preliminary paperwork. It's just a simple power of attorney that would allow me to act on your behalf with the estate lawyer. You know, since you're so busy with work, I could handle all the tedious back and forth for you. There it was. The trap. She wanted me to sign over power of attorney so she could forge whatever documents she needed to sell my house out from under me. I looked down at the papers and felt that cold anger solidify into something harder, something diamond sharp and unbreakable. I appreciate the offer, Patricia, but I'm not comfortable signing any legal documents right now. Like you said, these things are complicated. I want to make sure I understand exactly what I'm signing. Her smile disappeared entirely. Amara, I'm trying to help you. And I appreciate that. But the answer is no. We stared at each other across my kitchen table. In that moment, I saw her clearly for the first time. She wasn't a concerned mother-in-law trying to help her son's young bride navigate complicated legal matters. She was a con artist, a criminal. A woman who had made a career out of stealing from people who trusted her. And I had almost become her next victim. Patricia stood up abruptly, snatching the folder back. Suit yourself, but don't come crying to me when you're still tangled up in probate hell 5 years from now. She stalked out of my house, slamming the door behind her. I sat there alone in my kitchen, shaking with adrenaline. My phone buzzed. A text from Zara. Call me now. I called her immediately. What did you find? Zara's voice was grim. Amara, you need to sit down for this. I'm already sitting. Derek has been married 3 times before. 3 times, Amara. Not once like he told you. 3 times. My stomach dropped. What? His first wife was a woman named Simone Garrett. They got married in 2012. She owned a condo in Parkview, inherited from her father. 6 months after the wedding, the condo was sold. Simone filed for divorce 8 months later and tried to sue Derek for the proceeds from the sale. She claimed he forged her signature on the listing agreement and kept all the money. The case was dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Oh my God. It gets worse. Second wife, Tracy Palmer, 2016. She owned a house in Maplewood, also inherited property. Same pattern. They got married. He convinced her to sell the house, supposedly to buy something bigger together. House sold, money vanished. They divorced 10 months later. Tracy also tried to sue. Also couldn't prove fraud. The pattern is identical both times. And the third wife? Keisha Williams, 2019. She owned her own home in Riverside. Bought it herself, just like you. They got married. And 4 months later, she caught him trying to refinance the house without her knowledge. She filed for divorce immediately and went to the police. They investigated but couldn't build a criminal case. Not enough evidence. But Keisha told the police that Derek's mother was involved, that Patricia was the one coordinating everything behind the scenes. She said Patricia used to be a real estate agent but lost her license for fraudulent practices. I felt like I was going to throw up. So this is what they do. This is their whole thing. They find women with property, Derek marries them, they steal the property, and they disappear. Exactly. And Amara, there's more. Patricia Thompson served 2 years in federal prison from 2011 to 2013 for real estate fraud. She was convicted of forging signatures on property deeds and stealing proceeds from sales that should have gone to the legal owners. She's a felon, and her son learned from the best. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to process what I was hearing. They've done this at least 3 times before. 3 women that we know of. How many more were there? How many women had lost their homes, their inheritances, their security to these people? Zara, I need more than this. I need proof that they're planning to do it to me. Then you need to document everything. Record conversations. Get copies of any documents they try to get you to sign. Catch them in the act. How do I do that? Zara was quiet for a moment, thinking. Do you have access to Derek's phone? His computer? Email? I share an iPad with him. We use the same Apple account. Perfect. Start there. Look for emails, texts, anything between him and his mother. Look for communications with real estate agents or attorneys. And Amara, you need to talk to a lawyer yourself. Today, you need legal protection before this goes any further. Can you recommend anyone? I know a guy. Marcus Chen. He specializes in real estate fraud. I'll text you his number. Call him immediately and tell him everything. I will. Zara. Thank you. If you hadn't helped me dig into this, you would have figured it out anyway. You've got good instincts, Amara. You've had them from the beginning. Now you just need to trust them all the way. I hung up and sat there in my kitchen, in my house, the house I had built with my own 2 hands, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to be another name on Derek and Patricia's list of women they'd destroyed. I was going to catch them. I was going to document everything they were planning. And I was going to make sure they paid for what they'd done, not just to me, but to Simone and Tracy and Keisha and God knows how many others. I called Marcus Chen. He agreed to meet me that afternoon. I told Derek I had a doctor's appointment and drove across town to Marcus's office. He was a small man in his 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of barely contained intensity. He listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound journal. When I finished, he looked up at me and said, "You're lucky you lied about owning the house. If they knew the property was in your name, they would have already made their move. The fact that they think it belongs to an estate gives us time to build a case against them." What kind of case? Criminal fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, maybe even RICO charges if we can connect them to the previous victims. But to build that case, we need evidence. Lots of it. Conversations where they discuss their plan, documents showing their intent, communications between Derek and Patricia coordinating the fraud. I have access to a shared iPad. I can check their messages. Do it. Document everything. Screenshot it. Save it to a cloud account they can't access. And I want you to set up some recording devices in your home. Cameras, audio recorders. You need to catch them discussing their plan on tape. Is that legal? In this state, you have the right to record conversations in your own home. It's a one-party consent state, which means as long as you're present or you own the property where the recording is happening, it's admissible in court. Then I'll do it. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me. I have to warn you, Mrs. Thompson, this is going to get ugly. When you expose them, they're not going to go quietly. Derek will deny everything. Patricia will try to paint you as a vindictive wife. They'll fight back hard. Let them fight. I've got nothing to hide. They're the criminals, not me. Marcus smiled for the first time. Good. That's the energy you need. Now let's talk strategy. We spent 2 hours planning. Marcus connected me with a private investigator who could help me install hidden cameras in my house. He drafted a divorce petition that would be ready to file the moment we had enough evidence. He contacted his colleagues who worked with the district attorney's office to give them a heads up that a major fraud case was coming. By the time I left Marcus's office, I felt like a different person. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a hunter. And Derek and Patricia had no idea they'd picked the wrong prey this time. That night, while Derek was at a late work meeting, I installed 3 hidden cameras in my house. One in the living room, disguised as a digital clock on the bookshelf. One in the kitchen, hidden inside a decorative plant on top of the refrigerator. And one in the hallway, positioned to catch anyone going through my office. They were small, wireless, connected to an app on my phone that Derek knew nothing about. Everything they recorded would upload automatically to a secure cloud account. I also went through the iPad. I found exactly what I was looking for in Derek's email. Messages between him and Patricia going back months, starting from before he even proposed to me. Subject: New target identified. Mom, I think I found the next one. Her name is Amara Johnson, 33, nurse at St. Mary's. Single, no family, owns property inherited from grandmother. Estate still in probate. Should be easy to access once I establish legal connection through marriage. Timeline: 6 to 8 months from first contact to closing. Let me know if you can pull records on the property. Subject: New target identified. Excellent work. I ran preliminary records search. Property is in Riverside Heights, high-value area. Estimated worth $450K plus. Estate status unclear, but that works in our favor. Proceed with relationship. Keep me updated on timeline. Remember to move fast once marriage is secured. We can't give her time to figure things out like the last one almost did. I had to put the iPad down. I felt physically ill reading their messages. They talked about me like I was a mark, a job, a payday. Every date, every kiss, every I love you had been calculated. Derek had never loved me. He'd been hunting me from the very first conversation at that charity gala. There were more emails, dozens of them, planning our wedding, discussing how to approach the estate situation, coordinating with a notary who would forge whatever documents they needed, researching how long they'd need to stay married before filing for divorce to avoid suspicion. One email made me so angry I saw red. Subject: Insurance policy. Derek, make sure you're being extra attentive. Buy her flowers, rub her feet, tell her you love her every day. If she suspects anything before we close the deal, we need her emotionally dependent enough that she'll dismiss her doubts. The last thing we need is another Keisha situation, where she gets suspicious and lawyers up before we can liquidate the asset. Charm her, make her feel secure, make her trust you completely. Once the property is sold and we have the money, it doesn't matter what she thinks anymore. Asset. They called me an asset. They called my home, the thing I'd worked 6 years to build, something to liquidate. I screenshot every single email, every text message, every document. I saved everything to 3 different cloud accounts. I sent copies to Zara. I sent copies to Marcus. I made sure that even if Derek somehow discovered what I was doing and tried to delete the evidence, it would still exist in multiple secure locations. Then, I waited. I played the role of the clueless wife. I smiled when Derek came home. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I pretended I had no idea that every word out of his mouth was a lie. The cameras caught everything. 2 days after I installed them, Patricia came over while I was at work. The camera in my office captured her going through my filing cabinet, looking for the deed to my house, looking for estate documents that didn't exist. She was in my home, invading my privacy, searching for vulnerabilities she could exploit. That night, Derek brought up the idea of me signing a power of attorney. Baby, I've been thinking. With how busy you are at work, maybe it would be easier if I could handle some of the estate stuff for you. You know, communicate with your grandmother's lawyer, sign routine documents, that kind of thing. It would take the pressure off you. I looked him right in the eyes and lied as smoothly as he'd been lying to me for months. That's sweet, but I'm okay handling it myself. I don't mind the paperwork. He pushed harder. Are you sure? Because my mom knows a really good attorney who could probably speed up the whole probate process. We could have this resolved in a few weeks instead of months. I'm sure. I reached across the table and took his hand, playing my part perfectly. I appreciate you wanting to help, but this is something I need to do myself. It's the last thing I can do for my grandmother, you know? He squeezed my hand, and I saw the frustration flicker across his face before he hid it behind a smile. Of course, I understand. Just know I'm here if you need anything. Liar, con artist, thief. The cameras caught them 3 nights later. Derek and Patricia in my living room, thinking I was upstairs asleep. I'd taken an Ambien, he told his mother. She'll be out for hours. They sat on my couch and went over their plan in detail. Patricia had a fake death certificate for my fictional grandmother. She had forged letters from a fictional estate attorney. She had listing agreements ready to go with a real estate agency that was owned by one of her criminal associates. All they needed was for me to sign one document, just one, that would give Derek temporary authority to act on behalf of the estate. Once they had that, they could forge the rest. Patricia's voice was cold and calculating on the recording. We need to apply more pressure. She's being resistant. Maybe we approach it from a financial angle. Tell her the property taxes are overdue. Tell her the estate owes money, and if she doesn't act fast, there could be liens placed on the property. Derek nodded. I can do that. I'll tell her I got a call from the county assessor's office. Make it sound urgent, scary. She'll panic and sign whatever I put in front of her. And if she still refuses? Patricia asked. Then we go to plan B. We find the actual property records, confirm she's the owner, and I file for divorce, claiming the property as a marital asset. She bought it before we got married, but we can argue she was hiding assets. Worst case, we drag her through court for a year and bleed her dry in legal fees until she settles. Watching that video later, listening to them plot my destruction in my own living room, sitting on furniture I had bought, in a house I had built, I felt something crack open inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't fear. It was pure, crystallized rage. These people had looked at my life, at everything I'd sacrificed and worked for, and they'd seen nothing but an opportunity. They'd seen a target, a victim, a woman stupid enough to fall in love with a lie. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. They'd assumed that because I was kind, I was weak. They'd assumed that because I'd trusted Derek, I'd trust him blindly forever. They'd assumed I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. I took the video to Marcus the next day. He watched it twice, his expression getting grimmer each time. This is everything we need. This is conspiracy to commit fraud on tape. This is intent. This is premeditation. Amara, with this evidence, I can guarantee you they're going to prison. How long do we wait before we move? Not long. They're escalating. The more desperate they get, the more dangerous they become. I want to set up a sting operation. We're going to give them exactly what they want, and we're going to catch them in the act. What do you mean? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. You're going to tell Derek that you finally got the call from the estate attorney. The estate is being settled. There's a meeting scheduled to finalize the transfer of the property into your name. You're going to invite Derek and Patricia to come with you for support. And when they show up at what they think is an estate meeting, we're going to have law enforcement waiting. I felt a savage satisfaction bloom in my chest. When? 1 week from today. That gives me time to coordinate with the DA's office and get officers in place. Can you maintain the act for 1 more week? I've been maintaining it for months. 1 more week is nothing. That week was the longest of my life. I had to smile at Derek every morning. I had to let him kiss me goodbye. I had to sit across from him at dinner and make conversation, while knowing exactly what he was planning to do to me. Patricia came by twice more, each time pressing me about the estate, about signing documents, about making decisions about the property. I played my role perfectly. I told Derek on Thursday night that I'd received a call from the estate attorney. My voice shook just the right amount to sound emotional. The estate is finally being settled. There's a meeting on Wednesday at 2 p.m. to sign the final transfer documents. The house will officially be mine. Derek's face lit up with barely concealed excitement. Baby, that's amazing. You must be so relieved. I am. But I'm also nervous. It's a lot of legal stuff, and I don't really understand all of it. Would you come with me? And maybe your mom too, since she knows about real estate law. Of course. We'll both be there. You don't have to do this alone. I watched him text his mother immediately after I went to the bathroom. It's happening. Wednesday, 2 p.m. She's asking us to come. This is it. Patricia's response came seconds later. Perfect. I'll prepare the documents we need her to sign. Make sure she's emotional and overwhelmed at the meeting. Vulnerable people sign things without reading them carefully. Wednesday arrived. I woke up that morning and got dressed carefully. I wanted to look professional but not too polished. I wanted to look like a woman who was nervous about a big legal proceeding, not like a woman who was about to spring a trap. I wore a simple black dress and pulled my hair back into a low bun. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked tired, strained, good. That would sell the act. Derek was attentive all morning, making me breakfast, telling me everything was going to be fine, that this was the beginning of our real future together. I smiled and thanked him and let him hold my hand in the car on the way to the law office downtown. Patricia met us in the parking garage. She was dressed like she was going to a funeral, all in black, her face arranged in an expression of supportive concern. "Amara, dear, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay, just nervous." "Don't be nervous. This is a wonderful thing. Your grandmother would be so proud of you." Patricia put her arm around my shoulders as we walked toward the elevator. I had to fight not to shrug her off. Her touch made my skin crawl. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Marcus Chen's office was at the end of a long hallway. I'd been there before, but Derek and Patricia hadn't. They followed me down the corridor, both of them buzzing with anticipation. They thought they were minutes away from pulling off their con. They thought they were about to make me sign away my house and my future. I opened the door to the conference room, and everything stopped. The room was full of people, but none of them were estate attorneys. There were 2 police detectives in plain clothes. There was a woman from the district attorney's office. There was Marcus Chen, standing at the head of the table, with a folder full of documents. And sitting along the far wall were 3 women I'd never met in person, but whose faces I recognized from the photos Zara had sent me. Simone Garrett, Tracy Palmer, Keisha Williams, Derek's 3 ex-wives. Derek froze in the doorway. Patricia's face drained of all color. "What is this?" Derek's voice was tight with confusion and the first edge of panic. I turned to face him, and I let him see my real expression for the first time in weeks. I let him see the rage and the disgust and the satisfaction. "This is justice." One of the detectives stood up. "Derek Thompson, Patricia Thompson. I'm Detective Williams with the Fraud Division. We need to ask you some questions about fraudulent property transactions and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." "This is insane," Derek looked at me, his face a mask of wounded betrayal. "Amara, what is happening? What are you doing?" "I'm protecting myself." I looked him right in the eyes. "From you. From your mother. From the con you've been running on me since the day we met." Patricia found her voice, sharp and vicious. "You have no idea what you're doing, you stupid girl. We are your family. We've been trying to help you." "Help me?" I laughed, and it came out bitter and cold. "You've been trying to steal my house. You've been planning it for months. I have every email, every text message, every recorded conversation. I know about the fake death certificate. I know about the forged estate documents. I know about your prison record, Patricia. I know about Simone and Tracy and Keisha. I know everything." Derek's face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, calculation, and finally, anger. "You've been spying on us?" "I've been protecting myself from criminals. There's a difference." "You have no proof of anything. This is all some paranoid delusion. Derek, we need to leave right now." "Actually," Marcus Chen spoke up, his voice calm and authoritative, "we have extensive proof. Hours of video and audio recordings, dozens of emails and text messages, testimony from 3 previous victims who will testify to an identical pattern of behavior, and most importantly, we have a recording of you both discussing your plan to defraud Mrs. Thompson, recorded in her home, with her full legal right to do so." He pressed a button on the laptop in front of him. The screen on the wall lit up with the video from my living room. Derek and Patricia sitting on my couch, discussing how to pressure me into signing documents, planning their exit strategy, referring to my home as the asset they needed to liquidate. Derek's face was gray. He looked at me with something close to hatred. "When did you figure it out?" "The morning I got the call from Apex Realty about the appraisal you tried to schedule without my knowledge." My voice was steady, strong. That's when I knew for sure. But honestly, I've suspected something was wrong since the beginning. That's why I lied about the house." "You lied?" Patricia's voice was shrill. You told us it was your grandmother's house." "It was never my grandmother's house." I stepped closer to them, watching realization dawn on their faces. "I bought that house myself 6 years ago. I paid for it with my own money, with years of double shifts and sacrifice. There is no dead grandmother. There is no estate. There never was. The house has been mine the entire time, and you never had any legal right to it." The silence in that room was absolute. Derek and Patricia stared at me like I was a stranger, like I'd transformed into something they hadn't anticipated and couldn't recognize. "You played us," Derek said slowly. "No. I protected myself from people who were trying to destroy me. There's a difference." Detective Williams stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, we're going to need you to come downtown to answer some questions. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The arrest happened so fast, it was almost anticlimactic. They read Derek and Patricia their rights. They put handcuffs on both of them, cold metal clicking shut around their wrists. Patricia was screaming about false accusations and police brutality. Derek was silent, staring at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Was it respect? Hatred? Regret? I didn't care. I felt nothing for him except relief that it was over. As they led him out of the conference room, Derek stopped and looked back at me one last time. "I really did love you, Amara." I met his eyes without flinching. "No, you didn't. You loved what you thought you could take from me, but you never knew me at all. If you had, you would have known I'd fight back." They took him away, the door closed. And I stood there in that conference room, surrounded by people who had helped me, who had believed me, who had fought alongside me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Safety, freedom, power. Marcus came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." I looked at him, at Zara who had come in at some point during the confrontation, at the 3 women against the wall who had survived Derek and Patricia before me. I didn't do it alone. None of us do it alone. Simone Garrett stood up and walked over to me. She was tall, elegant, with sad eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Thank you. For doing what we couldn't. For stopping them." Tracy and Keisha joined us. The 4 of us stood there, 4 women who had been targeted by the same predators, and we shared this moment of painful, beautiful victory. "We're going to make sure they pay for what they did to all of you," the woman from the DA's office said. "With the evidence Mrs. Thompson has provided, combined with your testimonies, we're building cases for multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and grand larceny. They're looking at serious prison time." "How long?" Keisha asked. "Conservatively, 8 to 10 years each. Maybe more if we can prove this was an ongoing criminal enterprise under RICO statutes." 8 to 10 years. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to make up for what they'd stolen from these women. From me. From God knows how many others. But it was something. It was justice, imperfect and insufficient, but real. The trial took 3 months to prepare. Derek and Patricia both pleaded not guilty, of course. Their attorneys tried every trick in the book. They claimed entrapment. They claimed the recordings were inadmissible. They claimed I had seduced Derek specifically to frame him, which was so absurd it was almost funny. Almost. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the videos, the testimony from 3 ex-wives who all told the same story. The forged documents Patricia had prepared. The fake death certificate. The communications with the corrupt real estate agent and notary, who were also arrested as part of the conspiracy. I had to testify. That was the hardest part, sitting in that witness box, looking at Derek across the courtroom, telling a room full of strangers how I'd been deceived and manipulated and hunted. Derek's attorney tried to paint me as a liar, a manipulator, a woman who had trapped his client in a marriage under false pretenses. But Marcus destroyed that narrative on redirect. "Miss Johnson, why did you lie about owning your home?" I looked at the jury as I answered. because something inside me said I needed to protect myself. I didn't know why at the time. I just knew that revealing everything to a man I barely knew felt dangerous. And my instincts were right. And when did you discover Mr. Thompson's true intentions? When the real estate agency called to say he'd tried to list my house without my knowledge or permission, that's when I knew for certain that I'd been targeted. What did you do then? I investigated. I gathered evidence. I documented everything they were planning, and I made sure they couldn't hurt me or anyone else. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. I watched Derek's face crumble. I watched Patricia go rigid with fury, and I felt nothing but a cold, distant satisfaction. They'd get their appeals, of course. They'd drag this out as long as they could, but they were going to prison. That was certain. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was a stern black woman in her 60s who had clearly seen too many cases like this. She looked at Derek and Patricia with open contempt. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, you have preyed on vulnerable women in a systematic and calculating manner. You have stolen their homes, their security, and their ability to trust. The harm you've caused extends far beyond financial loss. You have damaged lives. You have destroyed faith in human connection, and you have shown absolutely no remorse for your actions. She sentenced Derek to 8 years in federal prison. She sentenced Patricia to 10 years, citing her prior conviction and her role as the mastermind of the operation. Both of them would be required to pay restitution to all their victims, though we all knew we'd probably never see that money. Criminals who get caught rarely have assets left to seize. As the guards led them away, Patricia looked back at me one last time. She hissed, "You're going to regret this." I smiled at her, cold and sharp. "No, you're going to regret underestimating me." The days after the sentencing were strange. I felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. I'd been running on rage and determination for months, and now that the fight was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. I filed for divorce immediately. That process was almost comically easy compared to everything else. Since Derek was in prison and couldn't contest it, and since the house had been purchased before the marriage and was solely in my name, the divorce was finalized in 6 weeks. I was Amara Johnson again. Single, free, safe. I changed every lock in my house. I changed the security codes. I had the entire place professionally cleaned, like I could scrub away the contamination of Derek and Patricia's presence. I redecorated, replacing furniture they'd touched, repainting walls they'd stood near. I needed to reclaim my space, make it mine again in a way that felt clean and untainted. Simone, Tracy, and Keisha stayed in touch. We formed this unexpected sisterhood, bonded by shared trauma and shared victory. We met for coffee once a month. We talked about healing, about learning to trust again, about the long process of putting our lives back together after they'd been shattered. Simone told me she'd received a settlement from the sale of her condo years ago, finally tracked down through Derek's hidden accounts. It wasn't everything she'd lost, but it was something. Tracy had gotten remarried, found a good man who understood her caution and her wounds. Keisha was in therapy, working through the betrayal and learning to forgive herself for not seeing the red flag sooner. We all carried our scars, but we were surviving. More than surviving. We were rebuilding. 6 months after the trial, a publisher reached out to me. They'd read about the case in the news and wanted to know if I'd be interested in writing a book about my experience. At first, I said no. I didn't want to relive it. I didn't want to expose myself like that. But then I thought about all the women who might be in the same situation I'd been in, who might be ignoring their instincts, who might be signing documents without reading them, who might be trusting too much and protecting themselves too little. I wrote the book. It took me 4 months, working in the evenings after my nursing shifts, reliving every painful moment and every small victory. I called it Trust Your Gut, How I Saved My Home by Trusting My Instincts. It was part memoir, part guide, part warning to other women about the predators who walk among us, wearing masks of charm and false love. The book came out 8 months after the trial. I did not expect what happened next. It sold 50,000 copies in the first month, then 100,000, then more. I was invited onto morning talk shows, podcasts, news programs. My story resonated with people, especially women, who had their own stories of being manipulated, deceived, targeted. I started speaking at events, conferences on domestic fraud, women's empowerment seminars, financial literacy workshops. I shared my story over and over, and every time I told it, I met women who thanked me for giving them permission to trust their instincts, for teaching them that self-protection isn't selfishness, that caution isn't paranoia. One woman approached me after a talk in Chicago. She was young, maybe 25, with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. I've been dating a man for 6 months. He keeps asking about my parents' rental properties, about whether I'm in the will, about our family assets. I thought I was being suspicious for no reason. But after hearing your story, I ran a background check. He's been married twice before, both times to women whose families owned property. I ended it yesterday." I hugged her. I told her she'd done the right thing. I told her that her instincts had saved her from years of pain. And I felt this fierce satisfaction, knowing that my pain, my fight, my refusal to be a victim had helped protect someone else. The book eventually sold 250,000 copies. I quit my nursing job and started speaking full-time, doing consulting work for law enforcement on real estate fraud prevention, teaching women's groups about financial protection and red flags in relationships. I made more money than I ever had as a nurse, and I put almost all of it into a foundation. I started to help victims of domestic financial fraud with legal fees and recovery costs. Derek and Patricia became case studies. Their pattern of behavior was taught in criminal justice classes. Their methods were analyzed in fraud prevention seminars. They became examples of what predators look like, how they operate, how they select and groom their victims. In a twisted way, their crimes ended up protecting thousands of potential victims who learned to recognize the signs because of what they'd done to me. I didn't date for 2 years after the divorce. I couldn't imagine letting anyone close enough to hurt me again. I built walls, high and thick, around myself and my home and my heart. I told myself I was fine alone. I told myself I didn't need romantic love, that I had my work and my friends and my security. That was enough. But loneliness is a patient predator of its own. It wears you down slowly, makes you question whether protecting yourself is worth the cost of isolation. I met Jordan at one of my book signing events. He was there with his sister, who had bought my book for him after his own experience with a con artist ex-girlfriend. He was tall, quiet, with kind eyes and an easy smile that didn't try too hard. We talked for maybe 10 minutes after the signing. He asked thoughtful questions about my work. He didn't pry into my personal life. He didn't ask for my number. He just thanked me for my work and left. I thought about him for weeks after. There was something about him, some quality of gentleness and respect, that stayed with me. When I saw him again 3 months later at a different event in a different city, I wondered if fate was trying to tell me something. We talked longer that time. He told me about his work as an architect, about designing sustainable housing for low-income communities. He told me about his own experience being scammed, how an ex had run up credit cards in his name and disappeared, leaving him with $50,000 in debt he'd spent 5 years paying off. We understood each other, Jordan and I. We both knew what it was like to be targeted, to be used, to have to rebuild trust from rubble. When he asked for my number, I almost said no. The fear was immediate and visceral, but something else was there too. Curiosity, longing, the tentative hope that maybe not everyone was a predator in disguise. I gave him my number. We talked on the phone for hours that night and for weeks after. We met for coffee, then dinner, then long walks through the city. Jordan was patient with my caution, in a way that felt genuine rather than calculated. When I flinched away from questions about my home or my finances, he backed off immediately. He never pushed. He never rushed. He let me set the pace of everything. After 6 months of dating, I told him the full story. Not the public version from the book, but the private version. The one with all the fear and shame and rage. I told him how violated I'd felt, how stupid, how broken. I told him I still had nightmares sometimes about Derek finding my house documents, about Patricia standing in my kitchen holding a forged deed. Jordan listened to all of it. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. I know how hard it is to trust after being hurt. I'm not going to rush you or pressure you. We move at whatever speed feels safe for you." 6 months after that, I ran a background check on him. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know. Jordan found out about it somehow, maybe from a mutual friend, maybe from seeing the inquiry on his credit report. I expected him to be angry, offended, insulted. Instead, he called me and said, "I know you ran a background check. I don't blame you. Did you find anything that concerns you?" No. His record was clean. One marriage in his 20s that had ended amicably. No criminal history, no financial red flags, no trail of broken women in his past. Good. I have nothing to hide from you, Amara. You need to protect yourself. I understand that. I respect it. That was the moment I started to actually fall in love with him. Not the polite, surface-level affection I'd felt before, but the deep, terrifying, real kind of love that requires vulnerability. Jordan understood that my caution wasn't a personal insult. He understood that I'd been hunted before, and he was willing to move slowly enough that I could learn the difference between a predator and a partner. We dated for another year before he proposed. It was nothing like Derek's proposal, which had been rushed and dramatic and designed to sweep me off my feet before I could think clearly. Jordan proposed on an ordinary Tuesday evening. We were cooking dinner in my kitchen, my house that I'd fought so hard to protect, and he just said, "I want to spend my life with you, if you'll have me. No pressure, no rush. Whenever you're ready." I said yes, but I also said, "I need a prenup. This house is mine. It will always be mine, no matter what, and I need that in writing." Jordan didn't even hesitate. "Of course, I would never ask you to give up your security. This house is yours. Your independence is yours. I'm asking to share your life, not take it over." We got married a year later. Small ceremony, just like before, but this time, it felt completely different. This time, there was no rushing, no pressure, no secret plans lurking beneath the surface. This time, I knew exactly who I was marrying. I'd vetted him thoroughly, met his family, talked to his ex-wife, checked every reference. I'd moved slowly and carefully, and I'd trusted my instincts every step of the way. On our wedding day, Simone, Tracy, and Keisha were my bridesmaids. These women who had survived the same predator I had, who had rebuilt their lives alongside me, who understood what it meant to love again after betrayal. They stood with me as I married a man I actually trusted, and it felt like coming full circle. We bought a second house together, Jordan and I, a new place that was ours jointly, where we could build our life together. But I kept my original house, my fortress. The home I'd bought with my own sweat and sacrifice. I renovated it and turned it into a safe house for women escaping domestic fraud situations, a place where they could stay for free while they rebuilt their finances and their lives. Derek and Patricia are still in prison. They'll be eligible for parole in 3 more years. I've already written letters to the parole board explaining why they should remain incarcerated for the full duration of their sentences. Simone, Tracy, and Keisha have too. We're all prepared to show up at their parole hearings and tell our stories again if we need to. A week before my wedding to Jordan, I received a letter from Patricia. It was the first communication I'd had from her since the sentencing. The prison censors had read it, stamped it, allowed it through. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won. The letter was 3 pages of venom. She blamed me for ruining her son's life. She called me a manipulative liar who had seduced Derek specifically to frame him. She said I would never be happy, that karma would come for me, that I'd destroyed a family and I'd pay for it eventually. I read it once. Then I wrote a reply. Just one sentence. I didn't destroy your family. I protected myself from your crimes. There's a difference. I never heard from her again. My life now is nothing like the life I imagined when I met Derek. It's better. It's real. I'm married to a man who respects my boundaries and celebrates my strength instead of trying to exploit my vulnerabilities. I've written 2 more books about financial fraud and self-protection. I run a foundation that has helped more than 100 women recover from domestic financial abuse. I speak to thousands of people every year, teaching them to trust their instincts, protect their assets, and refuse to be victims. And I still own my house. My beautiful craftsman-style home with the hardwood floors and the wraparound porch. The house I bought when I was 28 with money I earned and pride I built brick by brick. The house Derek and Patricia tried to steal. The house that's now a symbol of survival and resistance, and the power of trusting yourself even when the world tells you you're being paranoid. When people ask me if I regret lying about owning my house, if I feel guilty for deceiving Derek from the beginning, I tell them the truth. I don't regret it for a second. That lie saved me. That instinct to protect myself, to hide what I'd built until I knew I was safe, that instinct was the smartest thing I ever listened to. Society tells women to be open, trusting, giving. We're taught that suspicion is unbecoming, that caution is cold, that protecting ourselves too fiercely will drive away good men. But what society doesn't tell us is that predators rely on that training. They rely on women being too polite to run background checks, too accommodating to ask hard questions, too afraid of seeming paranoid to listen to their instincts. I'm here to tell you, be paranoid, be cautious, be protective of what you've built. Run those background checks. Ask those uncomfortable questions. Move slowly. Verify everything. And if something inside you says, don't trust this, then don't trust it, even if you can't articulate why. Your instincts exist to protect you. They're reading patterns and signals that your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. When your gut screams danger, listen. Even if you're wrong, even if you end up being overly cautious about someone who turns out to be safe, you'll be alive and intact to learn that lesson. But if you ignore your instincts and you're right about the danger, you might lose everything. I lied about owning my house, and that lie exposed the truth about who Derek and Patricia really were. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is keeping your cards close to your chest until you're absolutely certain you know who you're playing with. And there's no shame in that. There's only survival. Derek and Patricia thought they were hunting me. They thought I was their prey, their mark, their next victim. They thought my kindness was weakness and my love was blindness. They were wrong about everything. I was never their victim. I was their reckoning. And to every woman out there who's been told she's too suspicious, too guarded, too careful, you're not. You're smart. You're protecting what you've built. And there's no shame in that. There's only strength. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you in any way, if it taught you something or validated your own instincts, then hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Untold Stories so you never miss another one of these real-life lessons in survival and justice. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Have you ever had to trust your gut about someone? Your story might save someone else. Share it, speak it, own it. Because the more we talk about these predators, the more we expose their patterns, the harder it becomes for them to operate. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Truth is the best weapon. And women who refuse to be silent, who share their stories and warn others, who build communities of survivors and support, we're unstoppable. I'm Amara Johnson. I'm 34 years old. I outsmarted 2 criminals who thought I'd be their next victim. I protected my home, helped put predators in prison, and rebuilt my life on my own terms. And if I can do it, so can you. Don't let anyone make you feel crazy for protecting yourself. Your caution might save your life. Stay safe out there. Trust your gut. And never, ever apologize for being smart enough to protect what's yours.